Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My segment is sponsored by Tim Hortons. Today's topic, I appreciate Chris inviting me. Today's topic is going to be about project efficiencies. And the segment is just going to be sound bites. It's just going to be me letting you kind of into my world a little bit, into what we've gone through. Again, they're very small morsels, but hopefully you'll get something out of it. So good morning and welcome to the NFCA Education Week Express. These sessions are sound bites, like I said, of some details that are a small part of a bigger process. I'm going to be speaking to you from some of my experiences and strictly from a commercial install contractor's point of view in my presentation. I'll touch on the key points of a typical project and the efficiencies required to achieve success.
Hey, Don, I got to jump in. Your reading notes are showing up.
Oh, okay.
Not sure if you can.
Let me go back to this. Share. Yabba dabba.
There we go. Carry on.
You seeing that?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking a little bit about the life cycle of the project, which is actually the majority part of it. In there, we're going to talk about reading the tender, quoting with clear exclusions, pre-installation site meetings, which are also important, understanding the schedule phasing, understanding site, logistics, staging, and handling. I'll be speaking about my own personal experiences in those areas, and also involving your manufacturer representative, which I think oftentimes is a little bit forgotten. So like any typical project life cycle, it all starts with the project tender. You take your time, you read the details. There's too many things that can be overlooked at that point, but you got to keep reading them and don't let anything miss. You read the drawings and the specifications, and you begin the process by calling your manufacturer or representative to get the pricing. In the meantime, you start your estimating and takeoff process. Now, the big question is, did you go to the site preview? What should your question be? This is the time to get the checklist out and the RFIs. Taking a guess at anything could have grave consequences. We've also learned through this on our personal level, and you know, I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next few slides, but definitely read the details.
I think, Don, if you look at those, all those circles, everything between project and get paid basically is a debt to the flooring contractor. You're carrying the cost. So there's no 100%. Profit until that check clears in your bank account. So it's just high risk.
Absolutely. And you'll see as we go through the steps just how much risk ends up being towards the very end, just before you get paid. So the first part is done. You review all your numbers. You get somebody in your office to double check. You get a second set of eyes on it. You feel pretty confident. You go talk to your boss. He looks at it, gives you the thumbs up. But did you identify all the exclusions is my question. So how are you addressing all the floor preparation? Did you clearly identify the NFCA standard of responsibility? That's one thing that I would really encourage everyone to do is reach out to Chris Maskell and really get an understanding of what the standard of the responsibility is for floor preparation. Did you clarify what basic or minimal preparation means? We always get questioned on that. Well, what's the difference between basic and minimal preparation? Is it one skim coat? Is it two skim coats? Is it a full flood? Did you clearly identify the allowance and what it covers? Again, it's a question I oftentimes run into. Well, it's only a $5,000 allowance for floor prep. I haven't yet hit floor prep allowance below $5,000. We oftentimes get very, very poor substrates handed to us, and it just becomes a real collision course with what someone discovers or deems as being a good enough floor or subfloor.
Hey, Don.
So this is
let me just jump in. If you're a specifier, it's just about impossible to generate the language to describe minimal prep for floor cover and whatever prep comes before the floor cover shows up on site. It's difficult even for us in our trade as flooring installers or whatever role we fill to describe that process. And so if you're a specifier, I don't think you really need to describe the nitty gritty and the detail of what that prep is. You just have to say, follow NFCA standards, you could be more specific and say part A12 subfloor prep, and then all that direction goes to the general contractor to make sure it's looked after properly. That's it. Otherwise, how do you describe prep? It's impossible.
It is. It's kind of like the beauty in the eyes of the beholder. But this is an ongoing push and pull, drag them out scenario that's been pushed onto our trade for many, many years. In my opinion, and in Chris, and of course the NFCA, it's the responsibility of the general contractor or the builder to provide all of us with a smooth, flat, and if level floor is required substrate. Speak to Chris again on some of these details. He's got some great documentation that you can really put into your hip pocket when you need it. Also with the specifiers, have that conversation and let them know, what the expectation is. Another main pain point today is cost escalation clauses. They all play into the quote. This is an extremely difficult to manage process because it's especially difficult for the dollar fluctuation, freight cost, fuel, raw material, and the labor at the manufacturing level. It's not just labor that's going to be on the front end, but it's also on the back end. So we do our best to anticipate the budgets for that, but there are still some unfriendly GCs who really want to push you and they want to put you into that situation of committing, and committal is costly. But it's an uncomfortable situation, and I really stress, I can't stress enough really for you to approach it very carefully. Take the smart business approach. It's always nice to claim your stake on a project. Hey, I'm doing this, large, grandiose project, and I can talk about it. But when things go south, it's not great. So the old thought process for me is, if I don't take on the job as my competitor will, my own philosophy is I say, let them be smart and understand the differences between gross margin and gross dollar and what's involved in all of this. So fast forwarding a few days or a week after you submitted your quote, the call comes in, you get the PO, the CCDC contract is on its way. You jump up and down, run around the office, you high five all your mates, you do a few air fist pumps, just like a gunslinger. And then you sit down, and the first words out of everybody's mouth typically is, what did I miss? So in a light heart, I think, we all kind of worry about it, but I think nowadays most people are very, very diligent in reading the specifications. And when you do get that contract, it's a big sigh of relief, but the real work's just beginning. So now that you had the chance to take a deep breath, you get the ball rolling, and you schedule a meeting with the PM on site. That's the first thing that we do. If we can get on site and if we can really walk that area, hopefully it's out of the ground, hopefully there's a curtain wall up, hopefully that that we can get some kind of an indication, an idea of the early conversation. That's first prize. Sometimes you have a project that's awarded to you a year and a half in advance. Probably project isn't even coming out of the hole yet, but I encourage everybody to just stay on that treadmill and make sure that they're engaged with it. So you're going to have two very different meetings, of course. If you have a refit versus new construction, a refit is going to be a lot more challenging because there's a lot more unforeseen things. You can't really tell what's happening underneath the floor that's currently there. New construction, is a whole other ball of wax. We're having a lot more conversations now with the general contractors in the state of how they finish the substrate. Instead of going in and deeply power troweling a concrete slab, we're actually asking them to just leave it as a rough screed. But start the checklist, be fully transparent, and identify the start and stop points when you get onto site. Identify the trade schedule. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. And also the site movements. Who's ahead of you, who's behind you, who's pushing you, who are you pushing? And is there something or an area that needs to meet an early installation, such as maybe a server room or a portion of a specific level that they're going to be, building something out on? What is the sequence of that workflow? Definitely encourage you to ask about that. So they may also seem like tedious questions, but the devil's in the details. Trust me, folks, I speak from experience. Also, make sure you take notes along the way, repeat everything in an email, and ask for confirmation back. This is your insurance policy. Trust me, you'll need this one day.
Hey, Don, quick question. Does it help you if you put something like will follow NFCA standards in your terms and conditions at the bottom of the contract?
It does help you, but you have to identify them clearly what that is. And again, I would make sure that send someone an email. Hey, I'm sending you this. I really need you to understand it and read it. And then just send me back a confirmation email that you understand it. And if you've got any questions, just like an RFI that you would send out to your GC, ask them if they've got any questions back, and then respond accordingly. Because again, there's certain language there that, you know, gets overlooked. We understand it because we speak it, live it, and breathe it daily, but they don't. So it is a good point, Chris. Absolutely. The other thing that we do is we look for support from our friendly neighborhood manufacturer representatives. I know oftentimes this is something that gets overlooked, but I will tell you, it's a huge benefit. They're free, they're your local resource, and definitely include Chris Maskell as that resource. Those of you that are across the country or in other parts of Canada, please ask Chris when he's coming out, get his second eyes on it. This gentleman has a lot of experience. He's seen a lot of sites. I would really encourage you to follow through and reach out to him. Your manufacturers.
I got people like you to phone. That's what's really going on.
Together we're stronger, Chris, but I definitely encourage you to invite them to site. More often than not, they may identify something that doesn't align with the product recommendations. This can often be helpful, especially when the conversation on site becomes tough to navigate. It always, for some reason, turns out to be a bit of a gunslinger standoff. So a manufacturer representative can speak to their product and its limitations, and it oftentimes breaks that tension. This is
the value of having a tech rep, not a sales rep, attend site, because, you know, the sales reps can't be expected to know, you know, deep technical issues. In some cases they do, but in some they don't. And, you know, if I'm a sales rep for a manufacturer, am I getting paid to go to site, pay the $6 an hour parking outside, and take that time to go to site to, you know, maybe not have all the answers that you need on when the meeting takes place? You know, I'd like to think almost that manufacturers would recognize that if they did do that, and you did get technical reps or sales reps that understood the technical aspects of their product on site at the critical moment, they may save in some of their claims, which are astronomical over the course of a year. Communication, like you say.
And I agree with you, Chris. I think there's value to bringing, whether it's a sales representative or a product representative, rather, versus a technical representative. Just having someone that can speak to their product is a true benefit. I can only speak to those of us that live and work in Vancouver. We're very blessed. There's a good core. I think almost every manufacturer has a really terrific product representative, and they can really, you know, create those aha moments. Those are the aha moments that you really need to back you up sometimes at time, right on site. And the general contractor or somebody on site, the project manager will say, well, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, I get it. So use your local materials manufacturer, technical representative, or technical rep. They're very qualified. They're trained to speak on substrates, ambient temperatures, and recommended products, and they'll recommend the products that may fix a problem. We're also very blessed in Vancouver to have, you know, multiple sundries representatives available to us here. Everybody from Pay, Uzin, Ardex, custom building products. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of support that we have here locally. I don't hesitate at all to give any one of them a call and get them to site. So I encourage everyone to do so.
I echo that 100%. I mean, the guys that provide self-leveling underlayments or hydraulic cement underlayments, they know more about, I mean, you imagine the role that they fill. The base slab has to somehow connect and stay bonded to the floor covering. And there can be a heck of a sandwich of materials in between. Those guys technically are some of the smartest in the industry, though they have, you know, there almost should be a standard that they attend site and share their knowledge if a topping is being applied.
Agreed. So we move on. So the one thing that I encourage you is be in the conversation early. Especially when we're talking about schedule and phasing, get the work schedule and make sure you follow the changes. This is a typical Gantt chart. It's a very simple. This is just something that I downloaded off the internet. But if there's one thing that is guaranteed, it's the schedule changes. If you have labor dedicated, ensure that the general contractor knows that you have labor dedicated, and the impact delays will cause on your project or other work that you have scheduled, it could be grave. So making sure that you're always in communication. Every couple of weeks, I encourage a phone call. Hey, John, from such and such a company, general contractor, look, how's the schedule looking? Oh, hey, our plumbers are delayed, or hey, our sparkies are delayed. Make sure that you do have that conversation and stay on top of that. Especially today, I mean, labor is extremely challenging to fill today. The shifting schedules don't allow you to very much flexibility once you've got it all into play. So stay on top of it and stay on top of them. I really encourage you. It'll greatly benefit everything you do going forward. Again, so what if you have a phasing project? We just talked about labor, but what if you have a phasing project? This is actually something that we did, and we see that there's a demolition phase and then there's an actual construction phase, and how they're going to, you have to understand the differences. When you're reading a plan, you're really taking a look at, most people will look at it and say, well, I've got nothing to do with demolition. Mine's really to do with construction, but it has to do with demolition. It's critical that you're in sync with the general contractor. So be a part of that conversation. Now, how does that impact your schedule and labor? That's a question. Did you account for this phasing? And of course, coordinating mobilizations. And mobilizations are a challenge, especially on phased work. You plan sometimes for 3 mobilizations or 4, and maybe you get tripped by another phase, and that's sometimes, again, especially with labor being challenged and other projects coming up, you've got to make sure you're part of that. So whether you control your labor in-house or you use a subcontractor, you've got to have that information in front of you so you can schedule accordingly and ask the questions early. Get that communication going as quickly as you possibly can. So as you placed your PO, you wait for the manufacturer's confirmation, the ship dates, the arrival dates, but now comes the logistics question. So assuming you quoted the project correctly, you did all your numbers right, you either would have it shipped directly to site or your warehouse or a storage facility nearby, but those are storage costs. And but if the job is delayed, what if your schedule is pushed back a month, 2, 3? Are you covered? You can't afford to sit on it. You can't afford to pay the storage costs. So what do you do in this case? Do you have that storage conversation early enough? So from personal experience, we have experienced some of these uncomfortable moments, but we've been fortunate with our general contractors and the clients in general and overall, where we've managed to recover the storage costs. It's been a little bit uncomfortable, but I've heard stories of some really, really tough situations. Right now, when it comes to having your products delivered in a timely fashion, trying to keep up with the construction schedule, even locations that would be able to store material don't have the room anymore. So you've got to make sure that you're accounting for all of this in advance. It could be very costly. Yeah.
Picking on something like storage. So now you're on site and you're talking about how things are going to roll out, and it becomes apparent that no, you're storing the material. You thought it was going to be stored on site. What's your plan of action? Like at that point to do, but also if next job, what do you do to make sure that doesn't happen? Put it in your terms, or make sure that conversation is part of the standard procedure when you're dealing with a general contractor?
It's a very good question, Chris. We are now having that conversation up front, and we're actually putting it into our contracts. We're letting all of our general contractors know. The one thing that I've got to kind of back up to those of you that aren't familiar with the commercial life of a flooring process, manufacturers, we'll give them the PO, and they'll want to manufacture. I mean, they've got timelines. You've got to remember, they've got products that they have to manufacture in a specific queue. So in order to get your 3,000, 5,000, 20,000 yards of product manufactured, the big concern for them is making sure that they get it done on a timely manner. Don't forget, they're also hedging their bets, on material availability and costs. But the big thing is once they get that PO, they want to manufacture it and they want to get it out as quickly as possible. So when you are having that conversation and you're telling them, yeah, we're going to need it in March, and that's what's been confirmed to you by the general contractor or your client, you need to go back and let them know that, you know, that product is moving and here's what I've allowed. I've allowed 1 month of storage in my warehouse, or I've allowed 1 month of storage off site, but that product is going to land at your doorstep on March the 1st. And I can tell you honestly, it's being much more challenging these days because job sites are just so behind. There's nothing worse than the fear of having to put 3,000 or 10,000 yards worth of carpet tile on the second or third level underground parking. We all know that they experience sometimes flooding and all that sort of stuff. So it's a concern, Chris. It's definitely something that we're starting to put into our contracts. We're having that dialogue early enough, and if we can secure storage offsite, we'd rather do that and just make sure that it gets there safe and sound.
Well, and dialogue's one thing, but if you don't write it down, you're probably going to pay for it. And you know, the saying is, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So
absolutely,
somehow you have to maintain your relationship, your friendship with your good customer, the general contractor, and deliver tough news. It's a real tough situation.
Absolutely. So that kind of segues us into delivery and staging. The one thing that we're always concerned about is finally, you know, your order arrives, it's on time, and it's time to deliver the materials to site. So this happens to be a project that happened to us on a personal note. So we discovered that when the product was ready to be delivered to site, the general contractor said to us that, oh, okay, well, did you guys arrange for the crane? And we said, what are you talking about? Basically, we weren't allowed to use the man elevator. We weren't allowed to use any of the elevators. We had to hoist all of our materials to the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th floor. There was a lot of labor involved, a lot of additional handling that we didn't account on. And again, you know, this is one of those maydays, you know, hold the phone situation, you know, what's going on. So at the last minute, your GC informs you that there's been a change. And so what do? So you assume that the elevator in our case was yours to use, and has always been the case in our trade. I've never seen our trade have to hoist anything up through a window. Typically, we're that neat finishing trade. You can see all of our material is packaged in nice boxes on skids. We pallet, you know, we've got a pallet jack. We get them into the building. Everything's protected and shrink wrapped. We typically see that we would be doing that in an occupied office space building downtown or a residential tower. But unfortunately, this is one of those situations where the delivery was, no, can't use the elevator. And we ended up eating a handsome sum. Not only did we have to get a flatbed, but we also had to get a big enough of a crane to lift this material up and onto site. So we incurred definitely some costs there. But you know, like anything else, you know, you've got to have that conversation early enough. They told us to read the contract, and loosely worded was that basically it was said that all subtrades are responsible for their own hoisting and lifting onto site. And we just assumed as a finishing trade, much like a painting trade, we would be able to use a regular elevator, but in this case we didn't. So delivery is critical. Make sure that you know exactly how close to a building you can pull up. You know, this is a picture of Vancouver. Fortunately, it wasn't raining yet, but you can see the clouds in the background. So a lot goes into planning a delivery and coordinating it. Our purchaser, our project manager, they were all heavily involved in this.
Hey, Don, were NFCA standards specified on that project? They
were not, unfortunately.
So whereas, you know, if NFCA standards are specified, then there's very clear language in terms of work that is included for the sub-trade and work that is not included for the sub-trade, which when it's not included, it swings back to the general contractor. So the general contractor can offer you the extra work to go rent a hoist and do that, but it's your choice to accept it or turn it down. It just makes It's logical, common sense. Why would the subtrade be taking that risk on the outside of a building they have no control over? And so,
Yeah.
you know, NFCA standards are very clear. Hoisting, stuff like barricades, hoarding, hanging of plastic to contain heat, none of that is the subtrade's responsibility.
Absolutely, Chris. And that's a great note. And anybody out there that's listening in on this presentation, this is where the NFCA has, you know, those additional bullets that are in your holster, and you can definitely rely on Chris to get you that information. This project in particular, we didn't pursue that. We just needed to get things rolling. It was quite a delayed project, but we just wanted to make sure that you know, this is a good contractor, general contractor that we do work for, and we managed to work things out along the way with them. But it was extremely stressful. I will definitely say that. So moving on with staging, you know, once we delivered to site, this is another project. You know, staging, as you can see in the background, we're now in a predicament where we've got to put pallets of carpet tile, and then every other trade has their stuff on the floor, drywallers and you know, lighting guys. Everybody's got products in there, and it's a problem. So staging can oftentimes be a massive challenge. Some locations are a mess, some just don't have the space, and some are just poorly controlled. So this will oftentimes result in several uncomfortable conversations with site people, and perhaps even a bit uncomfortable to the point of, you know, where maybe the octave level is raised. Don't forget, our trade is a finishing trade, and we're oftentimes the piñata. I've always said sometimes we just have to be the steak. Our products have a temperature and humidity restriction. You know that. The proper storage is required, and a C-can does not fit that criteria. Speak to Chris. Chris has some great documentation over the years. I've seen some great pictures for storage requirements, but a C-can in this case, as you can tell, it's sitting in wet mud. It's a rusty old C-can, and this is what we were given to put our material in. And you can see that it was a bit of a fight to basically say, okay, some things we can put in that C-can, but other things we need to get into a properly acclimated space, and we need to make sure that it's not wet, and it's not, you know, not having to deal with temperamental climate changes. And in Vancouver,
what's the temperature in that steel can? If it's 30 degrees outside, which is not uncommon these days, what's the temperature inside? And is your flooring material and your adhesive going to withstand that high temperature, or conversely, minus 30?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at, let's say the temperature outside is plus 30 degrees, you could be inside there easily plus 50. And in the winter, it could be completely the opposite. So, you know, having adhesives frozen is not an option. You know, there's been significant failures over the years. I was involved in a couple of those claims as an adhesive manufacturer representative some years ago. So it's definitely something that has to be addressed. Do not allow your product to be stored in a C-can, or at least get it out of that C-can as soon as you possibly can, and make sure that you're on top of the weather. So we talked a little bit about handling in a few slides ago. So handling is one of those things that definitely costs you money. Our company is looking at that very closely now. Everything from a delivery to getting it up to the second and third floor. So money, and it's extremely inefficient. It's a very quick way. Handling is a very quick way to erode profit margin, and most of us don't calculate it in any contingency for that exact reason. One thing about our trade, we are razor thin margins in a lot of cases. We don't have the ability to carry a contingency or a fat contingency or any contingency for that matter. So, you know, you oftentimes in our trade, we'll take a guess, and that's why we calculate. Okay, so we're delivering a container to site. It's going to take us 1 hour, you know, 4 guys, and you start doing the math accordingly, and that's what you guess. But all it takes is a little bit of a hiccup. We had a situation where we couldn't unload a container on a specific site. They rerouted us over to the opposite side of the building. So that meant we had a longer distance to go. Further yet, they closed off certain corridors because they were putting in sprinkler systems, and there were certain power restrictions. And that just can really, really cripple you. You know, do you turn away the container? So how do you manage this? And handling is one of those things where you really have to do a decent job at calculating, but you also have to make sure that you relay that information to your general contractor or to your client. So example, waiting for elevators, that sucks. Anybody that's worked in high-rise towers, you know what that's like. If you're on the 27th floor calling down, you know, you're sitting there for 20, 30 minutes to get picked up, and then you're doing a milk run. If you're running up and down a flight of stairs with boxes of base or boxes of carpet tile or rolls of anything, so it's costly, you know, and especially if you're doing any after-hour stuff, you're trying to accommodate that. It's definitely profit out of your bottom line. So how many times do you want to move the dirt pile is the question that I ask. Think about it and definitely make sure that you're not having to repeat that same process. Moving forward, so once you've got the floor prepped, you've got the area to yourself, hopefully, you know your layout, if it's off, and it's off to the races from that point. As we all know, time is money, and the competitive bids mean you've got to put the mileage in order to meet the schedules. So the most important action on this site is communication, making sure that you are talking to the site superintendents and you're letting people know that where you'll be working, how much space you need, what areas you need available to you tomorrow, right? And we've been very fortunate that oftentimes site superintendents really allow us to get that mileage ahead of people, or we're pushing people. But that sometimes comes back also to bite you, because we may end up getting a little bit ahead of the other trades. And what happens is that now it just creates an issue or creates a bit of a problem where we've got trade damage. You know, they drag their ladders, they pull boxes on, whatever it is. So the other thing that I definitely encourage you when it comes to this type of an installation, those of you that are project managers, don't leave your mechanics to navigate through the fog by themselves. Ensure your project managers or your account managers are engaged at all levels. Not showing up to site meetings or being involved in the communication reel could be a receipt for disaster. So my suggestion, our team is always involved, whether it's a weekly meeting or a phone call. Now with the inception of Zoom over the last couple of years, I really encourage you, don't allow a site to be controlled on its own, because your guys will get lost and you're going to start seeing your profit margin really erode quickly.
Hey, Don, on that topic, I mean, some contract houses are going to have 20, 30, 40 significant projects on their books at any one time. And you've only really got one project manager, maybe dispatcher, looking after some of the details. Do you, because you can't see them all of the time, do you, I mean, I'm sure there's a tendency to say, well, we can't do that on every job, so we don't do it at all. Do you, for example, identify maybe, you know, the top 10% of those 40 projects that are in the books at any one time that have, you know, alarm bells ringing before you even start the job, and focus on communication on those projects? How do you handle that?
Absolutely. Good question, Chris. The one thing is, you know, you're always, this presentation is kind of generic, you know, kind of on a large scale. The first thing is you're going to obviously take a look at the size and the scope of a project. So not every project is going to require all of your attention, but definitely anything that's involving several floor levels, or something that's really of some significant magnitude, that has patterns. Hospitals, for example, that would be an area where you definitely want to be involved a little bit more frequently. If you've got any large commercial projects, whether it's, I'll just throw some out. Everybody's familiar with Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, any of those larger projects where you're doing multiple levels, multiple schemes, multiple designs, you definitely want to make sure that you're involved. If you're doing something very small, maybe 1,000 square yards, maybe it's a bank or something along those lines, you can have your site guys handle that. Again, banks are typical phase work. But you definitely, on a larger scale project, you want to be involved, and be involved early. You know, understand what they have as an expectation, and then level back your expectation, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's teamwork, and if you don't have that conversation, it's awfully difficult. So
I know when quality assurance program, the NFCA quality assurance program is specified, you know, the owner and the consultant get together and say, yes, we want to pay for the service, so that we have, you know, essentially a catcher's mitt, if you will, on the project to catch the details that typically get overlooked. One of the first things out of the gate that the QAP brings to the table is a specified pre-installation site meeting, where manufacturer, consultant, flooring trade, site super, inspector, everybody's around the table getting on the same page. And those are the most important things in the whole process for me. We write minutes up about those. And so everybody can refer back to the content in the meeting where everybody said, yep, we're on the same page now, let's go. Without it, it's not necessarily going to happen. We have health authorities now calling us a year and a half, 2 years in advance to talk flooring before they pour their slabs, so that the slab surfaces are delivered correctly, so the floor installer doesn't reject them during late stage construction. It's just common sense.
Chris, I can't champion the QAP program enough. We've had several experiences in the QAP. If we have any specifiers or any architects or anyone out there in the GC world, I really encourage you to really take a look at the QAP program. The protocol and the process that it sets up in advance, it almost doesn't leave any room for mistakes. The margin of error shrinks significantly. And again, Chris, to your point, with the QAP, with the site meetings, with the discussions, we have a project right now actually with you in a QAP. We're a year out. And you guys have already had the initial conversation with the general contractor. You've been to site, you see exactly what's going on. So to me, it takes away all the headaches, all the stress, all the pressure, and it takes away all the questions.
All the bad habits. All the bad habits
Absolutely.
get pushed aside because it's transparent. Consultant gets to see what's going on. The owner gets to see. And so, best practices are what replaces
the comfort level. The comfort level that we've experienced with going through a QAP process has been incredible. And again, the consultants love it. Because everything is transparent, and there is a certain ownership experience that nobody can pass the buck to anybody else. Right. So finally, you managed to complete your project, and now it's time for the final invoice. Ensure you've walked the site. Take that time to walk with the GC, and we typically walk the site weekly. Okay, we will walk it before the job ends. We will actually audit and catch a lot of deficiencies. If there are any deficiencies, we'll catch them in advance. So address everything, address all the deficiencies, be diligent, get them done as soon as possible. Don't drag your feet about them, get somebody there, fix them right. Don't get bogged down into the weeds of it all and trying to point the finger and trying to collect money for electricians and everybody else. That is something that you would have already had conversations about. Trade damage is oftentimes a push, pull, drag them out fight as well. But clearly understand your contract, understand the terms of the payment. You've completed your portion and you're now entitled to the final payment. And again, no one wants legal costs. Nobody can afford legal costs, but communicate to eliminate misunderstandings. So for the entire cycle and flow, close to the end here, wrapping things up for the entire cycle, and for everything to flow smoothly, I've got to say you must clearly communicate throughout the entire process. Detail everything on paper. And by paper, I don't mean print everything, but document everything on an email and do not fall back on anything verbal. I'm nearly as old as dirt. And I remember doing work in the 80s where it was a phone call. It was just simple on-site. Yeah, we'll get that done. So you got my back? Yeah, okay. So that's going to cost you, $3,000. Okay, great. Go get her done. It doesn't work, unfortunately, anymore. It's way too easy and too convenient to forget a conversation on-site. So as we mentioned earlier, make sure that you document everything. I take minutes on every site walk that we take. Our staff does it. We get back to the office, we immediately email them back, whether it's to the architect, consultant, designer, engineer, and or the client, whoever it is, and we just have them acknowledge, like, this is what we talked about on site, and we do it in brief point form, so it's an easy read. It's not overly complex, but it's definitely things that we back up. So my suggestion to all of those out there, what we do is we involve our local manufacturer representatives. Again, they're free, they're wonderful, they're refreshing, and besides, they might buy you lunch. Involve the NFCA, involve Chris Maskell. He's got a world of knowledge. He's wise, and he will definitely, he sees enough projects across the country. He'll be able to speak to just about any topic. And definitely initiate dialogue with your GCs or any of your clients, and find the communication sweet spot. I can't stress that enough. Communicate, communicate, communicate. So with that, I'm kind of done. So together, this is my kind of thought process going forward. Together, we are stronger in our industry, includes the architects, consultants, and everyone. I'd like to start the conversation with each and every one of you. You can get a hold of me through Chris or anybody. I'm a big believer in sharing best practices, and they will only elevate our industry and the image. They will elevate our quality and the profitability. So thank you all. I encourage more conversation amongst the industry. We're all challenged in similar ways, and dialogue only helps us, and dialogue only helps us get better. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you, Don. Fantastic. We'll open the floor, or the screen, I guess I should say, to any questions. Just type them into your, or ask away. Mics can be turned off, or mics can be turned on, I should say. Looks like silence.
I'm free to go.
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm from the consultant side. It's interesting that you said about the QAP program that, for a new build, that you arrange a pre-flooring construction site meeting and whatnot. That's fine and dandy, but a lot of time when we're dealing with renovation, by the time that you actually have a general contractor on site and you try to arrange a pre-site meeting, there's really not much you can do, because the guys already quoted on the flooring pricing, right? So if you discover that the flooring is full of dimples or whatever it is, flawed, it's time for the extra, right? That is what is a potential way to prevent that from happening?
Well, renovations are tough. I mean, my comments were more targeting brand new builds, but if the general contractor doesn't carry the cost to prep their floor in accordance with National Floor Covering Association standards, which are very clear in one section of the manual, like I mentioned earlier, Part A12, subfloor prep, that needs to be waived in the face of the general contractor so that they can ask questions, price at that time so that they bid competitively against other general contractors looking to get that award, so that when the job goes critical mass and the flooring guy shows up on site, there's money to straighten the substrate. If that conversation doesn't happen, that budgeting doesn't happen, it's just going to be the same old fight. And we see perfectly good companies go straight to court. If you're dealing with 50,000 square feet at $2 or $3 a square foot to get things flat, it's a lot of money to just pull out of your back pocket. It's not going to happen. So flooring contractors walk off. They do the right thing because they're certainly not going to be able to afford to fix that. They get then sued for non-performance. And, if you've got no independent third party on site, who do you believe is the consultant? It's really tough, George, in your role to try and, untie all the knots and make sense of it. Inspectors can create that sense of trust. We've had several projects where, in one case, the general contractor refused to take moisture tests because they hadn't budgeted for it. Well, sorry, but NFCA standards and manufacturer standards require ASTM moisture testing be done if you want a warranty. Question goes to the owner, do you want a warranty? Answer comes back, yes, we do. Well, then your general contractor has to comply with NFCA standards. They take the tests using a third party. In that case, half the floor, 20,000 square feet, came back dry, as you would expect, because this is a 50-year-old slab. The other half, soaking wet, 9 pounds, 11 pounds. I'll spare you the details as to why. But now the owner and the general contractor behind the scenes are able to have the conversation, and out pops $30,000 to buy and apply a moisture mitigation system so that that floor doesn't blow off the substrate 3 weeks after installation. That's one scenario, but you know, renovations are tough. Don.
George, I'll chime in. Actually, it's quite funny that you brought that up, Chris. And those of you that are out there listening to this wasn't rehearsed, actually. George, refits are extremely difficult. It's no different than you know, you're assuming that when a wall is taken down or you have a demising wall, you're not going to have any structural issues. You're assuming that there's, you know, the plumbing is going to be intact. And so there's always that unforeseen. In line with what Chris was saying, that this is actually happening right now as we speak. We have a financial institution that we priced, we quoted, we ended up being awarded, and our crew was set a week and a half ago to go in and lift up the existing carpet tile, and our account manager ended up going out to site and lifted up a couple just to see, you know, now that the furniture has been moved, how easy it was going to be. Well, he discovered mold spores, and he started to lift more and more areas. Well, we had to abate the entire area. It had to be completely redone to the tune of close to $40,000.
You said mold spores, Don, yeah? Mold spores?
That is correct. Yeah. I mean, there's so much moisture underneath. I was going to actually put some of these photos in the presentation, and I'm welcome if you want to contact me after this. I'm happy to share that with you, but it was incredible. It was unforeseen. General contractor never thought that it would be a problem. The financial institution never would have thought that it was a problem. And it was just one of those things where between the property owner and the financial institution, they came to an agreement that it's a health issue, it's a health hazard, and they decided to up the cost of it. So it's worked out fortunately, but you as a consultant, it's extremely difficult for you to even imagine that contingency would have to be added into it. What I would suggest is just have that conversation. If you know that like this structure that we worked in happens to be about a 50-year-old structure, chances are that there is some problematic you know, issues, and there are some challenges. So I would always encourage that upward conversations with the client to say, look, we just don't know. There may be some uncovered you know, bad areas, or you know, in the walls or whatever it is. But be prepared that we may have to deal with these things, because it's hard for you to go in and excavate and figure it all out. It's virtually impossible. New construction, different ballgame.
There are no magic wands, obviously, but there is such a thing as a cash allowance for unforeseen substrate or subfloor rectification. See the floor covering trade as, you know, a lot of consultants or architects will refer to floor coverings like they do paint, as applied finishes. You know, we don't expect the painter to go to site and fix the tape and the mud on the drywall. Floor coverers do not go to site to fix concrete, base concrete, because they have no idea what's going on with it. The larger contract, the larger numbers are with the general contractor to carry those costs. They've got more flexibility. You know, a flooring trade off of a 15% margin on a small budget anyway, is not going to be able to help, and it's not their scope of work anyway.
No, no, thank you for the comment, but the reality of thing is that, Chris, you know, that not, you know, I'm saying that I'm not trying to diminish any general contractor's ability, but a lot of time when we respect what you say, how do we know that they know what that means, that they have to carry this stuff? That often is the issue. You know, on a big job, probably less likely so, but on a small size job, you know, it's really difficult, right? I mean, you know, a lot of these small time contractors, they don't know what, you know, what your specification mean. So when you uncover the flooring, that is where the argument comes. He said, oh, I didn't carry that. You said, okay, well, it's in the spec. He said, well, I don't know what that means. So, you know, where do you go from there, right? I mean, for a small job, you're not going to take the guy to court. And often the times, you know, you're just going to write a change order, you know, rightly or wrongly so. But, you know, it's a reality thing. It's super difficult. I sympathize with you, and, you know, but you can see outside too, it's very difficult. Like, you know, oftentimes, yes, we can put a cash allowance, but, you know, that's really just another way of writing a blank check for them to write a change order, right? They know that, you know, you get allowance there, so why should I price it in? You know, so in some way, it's a very difficult situation on both sides.
I would say Division 1. Very simple language that places the responsibility with the general contractor in Division 1. The floor trade and the general doesn't expect the floor trades to look at Division 1. That is their division. That speaks to the whole project. But if you leave this stuff in Division 9, now there's ambiguity. Is it their job? Is it my job? You know, it's...
Yeah, it's a good point, good point.
So, I mean, we've got a specification that we've put out there for free. It's on our website that tells you how to specify, as a consultant, proper placement of concrete toppings. And it all starts with put it in Division 1. Then the big boys can include it in their price and then pay the skilled trades to do the work they need done.
Okay,
If I can just chime in really quickly, George, you're absolutely right. We've run into some general contractors that are small time, and you know, it's always it's a slippery slope, because what happens is you know, everybody wants the job, the GCs want the job, and they are not necessarily the most scrupulous bunch, but we as a trade, we are free to consult for you. I have a number of local general contractors that'll say, hey, you know, I'm looking at this project, would you come out, I'll buy you a coffee, and I'll go out and take a look at a project, and I'll let them know, hey, be aware, this might be a problem, this might be a problem. But we've met those small time guys that bid low, they got the job, and now they're in a panic mode because, you know, all of a sudden they can't grab their ass with both hands. So you're absolutely right, George, but do lean on the industry. The flooring industry has some really, really good people. They've got great manufacturers. They've got great technical support. It doesn't hurt to just consult with them. So whoever calls on you, or whoever's on your speed dial, give them a shout, and they can always bump you down the road to somebody else. We're glad and happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you.
100%.
Chris, we have a question also from Aaron Abbott.
Yeah. You want to read it out and go for it?
So the question is, can you recommend a system for recording your communications and a punch list, discussing, etc.? Get it in writing and store it in a special system, or just keep your emails? So Chris, do you want to talk about your list, and then we talk about how we do it?
Well, we have that meeting, which is specified. Once you put NFCA standards on the job, there's a specified requirement for that meeting to take place. The inspector, and usually myself, will attend that meeting, or someone else from NFCA, and we keep minutes, and then we deliver the minutes at the end. Within 48 hours of the meeting taking place, everybody gets 48 hours to question those minutes, make changes, corrections, whatever, and then they go into the record. And it's very powerful. In 6 months' time, when everybody's forgotten what was said and agreed to go back and say, look, here it is, right there in the minutes. And then, you know, you can't deny that. And it looks kind of foolish to try and challenge it at that point. And so everybody just gets on with the job.
For us, Aaron, what we do is we'll attend a site meeting, and what we do is photo diary. So we take a lot of photos, and the minute we get back, you know, I've also recorded, voice recorded on my iPhone. I've voice recorded everything step by step as we've gone. I also narrate a lot of the video. So if I am walking a site, or if any of our account managers are walking a site, they'll actually narrate, and that'll be in the notes, and we will attach that as it's a file. We'll send it to the client or to the general contractor, and we'll say, hey, you know, here's what we've noted. You now have a copy of this as well. It's been documented, and these are the itemized remediation processes. So we keep a file. I keep it on my desktop, or the account managers keep it on their desktop, and everything at the very end. If it does get addressed, we're good. If not, it's an insurance policy for us as a backup. But it's critical that we document. So these iPhones that we have nowadays are incredible. The pictures you can get from them. I encourage everyone, take the photos, take the video, narrate. It's the best way. For an old guy like me, I remember everything when I watch the video back. It's better than Netflix.
Emails, texts, admissible in court. It's funny how the general contractor will say, yeah, you need to do this, that, and the other, and then you email, well, wait, that's not part, and then it all changes as soon as it's written down, right? It's the key.
Great questions, Aaron. Really great. Feel free to reach out, sidebar as well.
Good. I think that's it for questions. Don, I think we can let you go. You're a busy
Hey,
guy.
Chris, I've got one quick question here.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Will the Q&A process here be included in the recorded video?
Yes.
Excellent. I think not to take away from Don's presentation, that was really good, and I'll be sharing it with a lot of our guys here. But these Q&A sessions, I think, are some of the best parts of these education videos.
Yeah. Yeah, true that.
So, Jordan Vogt, all the way from Steinbeck, Manitoba. We love you. Please reach out. Great to share any information, any help we can provide you guys. We're always there for you, man.
Thanks, Don. And Chris, you can end the recording 20 seconds ago. You know,
No, you're on the record now, man.